I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, supreme scrutiny. Republicans and Democrats battle over alleged business deals by justices on the nation's highest court. A culture of safety. The Holy Father meets with members of his advisory board on the protection of minors. A symbolic end. What the World Health Organization is saying about the COVID-19 pandemic. And crowning achievement. A preview of tomorrow's coronation of King Charles III, including a look at the ceremony's Catholic roots. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us. Our top story tonight, the Biden administration is blasting a new pro-life measure protecting the unborn. North Carolina lawmakers have just approved and sent to the governor a ban on nearly all abortions after 12 weeks of pregnancy. That is down from the current 20 weeks. Pro-life groups say it will save lives. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. Whenever and wherever pro-life legislation is approved, the Biden administration has been quick to condemn, pounce, and criticize it. And this time out of North Carolina, no different.
The White House reacts, writing in part, North Carolina's Republican supermajority-controlled legislature passed an extreme abortion ban that would interfere with the doctor-patient relationship and make it even harder for women, especially those in the South, to access care. SBA Pro-Life America wrote, the North Carolina Senate has passed the Care for Women, Children, and Families Act to protect unborn babies from late-term abortions, sending the measure supported by 62% of voters to Governor Roy Cooper's desk. Adding, by 12 weeks gestation, all major organs have formed, and the heart has beat over 10 million times.
This morning, we got some good news from the jobs report.
Also today, President Joe Biden meets with his Investing in America cabinet in the Roosevelt Room. The meeting comes as the Labor Department reports America's employers added a healthy 253,000 jobs in April, evidence of a labor market that still shows surprising resilience despite rising interest rates, chronically high inflation, and a banking crisis that could weaken the economy.
Inflation is now down 40% since last summer. It's come down the last 9 months in a row. We obviously have more work to do, but we're trending in the right direction. And I think we're making real progress.
And on the ongoing, intensifying debt ceiling debate,
whether you pay the debt or not doesn't have a damn thing to do with what your budget is.
Meanwhile, First Lady Jill Biden in London for the coronation of King Charles III. President Biden sent his wife to represent the United States at Saturday's coronation. She was welcomed by Akshata Murty, the wife of the UK Prime Minister.
Also tonight on this May 5th, earlier today, President Biden tweeted out Happy Cinco de Mayo. In fact, he and the vice president stopped by a Mexican restaurant here in town today to grab some lunch. Now, more on that jobs report. The unemployment rate dipped to 3.4%. That matches a 54-year low. However, 43,000 people also left the labor force. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Democrats are ratcheting up calls for Supreme Court ethics reform. It follows reports that Justice Clarence Thomas accepted luxury trips for more than 2 decades from a Republican megadonor and received other favors without reporting them. Republicans accuse Democrats of being bitter over recent high court rulings. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more. Eric?
Well, good evening, Tracy. You know, it was just this week that Senate Democrats called a hearing after media reports of alleged ties between 2 of the court's conservative justices and parties with interests in its cases. Now, Republicans say that it is an attempt to dismantle the court and add more justices, but Democrats and even former federal judges are calling for a code of conduct for the nation's highest court.
Ethics cannot simply be left to the discretion of the nation's highest court. The court should have a code of conduct with clear and enforceable rules, so both justices and the American people know when conduct crosses the line.
The absence of a formal structure for defining and validating the ethical rules governing the Supreme Court justices is untenable. Too many Americans already think that the justices decide cases based on their political preferences and alliances rather than the law.
Republicans made it clear they would push back against any congressional attempt to impose rules on the court and accuse Democrats of threatening the justices.
We're going to push back as hard as we can and tell the American people the truth about what's going on here. This is not about making the court better. This is about destroying a conservative court. It will not work.
And away from the hearing, some Democrats want more than just a code of ethics.
I think beyond that, there ought to be term limits on the court. I think we need to expand the court.
Republican Senator Eric Schmidt tells me these ideas are part of a larger plan.
That this is a familiar tone now the Democrats are setting, which is all predicate to be laid down to delegitimize the court so they can ultimately pack the court. It's a power play, and they're going after the independence of the judiciary, and that's a threat to the republic.
Senate Minority Whip John Thune tells me Congress should leave ethics up to the high court.
Now they're going after individual justices. They set their own rules over there. This is not the role of Congress. We're an independent branch of the government, so is the court.
It was just last week that all 9 justices signed a rare joint statement making it clear that they believe that it should be up to them to police themselves on their code of ethics and not Congress. Lawmakers are also working on bipartisan bills requiring the court to come up with ethics code just like other courts. And even, listen to this, some Democrats even want to tie next year's Supreme Court budget to the creation of an ethics code. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
The Department of Health and Human Services is backing down from its demand that an Oklahoma Catholic hospital extinguish its sanctuary candle. HHS had said the candle was a safety hazard. However, local officials, including the fire marshals, had approved it. The hospital's lawyers said the mandate was a violation of religious freedom. And for more on this story, including reaction from hospital officials, you can visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. And in Pennsylvania, a federal judge says that a public middle school must host a so-called after-school Satan club. Officials from a nearby satanic group filed a lawsuit saying that they were being discriminated against because of their viewpoints. A new report from the National Assessment of Educational Progress finds that test scores for 8th graders in the United States in both US history and in civics are on the decline. This after the so-called Nation's Report Card also recently announced that reading and math scores fell for 9-year-olds to levels not seen in decades. And now we go to Angela Morabito, spokesperson for the Defense of Freedom Institute and former press secretary for the U.S. Department of Education. Angela, great to have you back on. First off, let's talk about these numbers and what they say to you.
Well, Tracy, it's great to be with you, but I sure wish we had better news to discuss, because when only 13% of America's 8th graders are proficient in history, that's an educational state of emergency. It means that our K-12 system is failing at its most basic function to equip students with the tools and knowledge they need to be full and productive citizens of this country.
And Angela, what part do you think the pandemic played in these test score results, if any?
I think the pandemic did play a part, but there are 2 things that were bigger. First were the prolonged school closures led by the teachers union. I was so privileged to serve under Secretary DeVos, and I watched how hard she fought to reopen schools while teacher union bosses fought her every step of the way. And the second factor here is that these scores weren't great pre-pandemic. It's just that these prolonged lockdowns have really pushed them off a cliff. So this problem has been brewing for a while, but it is the school closures that went on for way too long that have made it exponentially worse.
Yeah, and you're right. I know in this study it said that the history test scores have been on the decline since 2014. I want to pick up on what you said about the teachers union. Last week, Randy Weingarten, the union president of the American Federation of Teachers, testified before members of Congress regarding the school closures. What do you think we learned from that testimony, and what do you think will come from it?
I I think we saw in that testimony just how low these teacher unions will go to defend their indefensible actions. Seeing Randy Weingarten try to gaslight the American public into believing that she wanted schools to reopen is just patently absurd. I remember the demands that teacher union leaders made in order just to get their teachers back to work. They wanted things like Medicare for all, defunding the police, highly politicized and really radical content in school curricula. They demanded these things because they knew they had a captive audience. They knew that parents wanted schools to reopen. Science said they could do it safely. Kids wanted to be back in the classroom. But where we in the Trump administration saw an opportunity to help students, the union saw a chance for political leverage.
Yeah, and as you know, I want to bring this up. Research has shown that children had tremendous learning loss from those school closures. In fact, Angela, they lost about 35% of a year's worth of learning. How are our kids going to get that back? Is there anything that can be done? And how much of a disadvantage does that put them at?
That loss is heartbreaking, and if it's not fixed, it puts these kids at a disadvantage for a lifetime. We know the data shows that in places where schools stayed closed for longer, students suffered more, but there are ways to fix this. And the simplest one is moms and dads at the kitchen table. It's sad that yet again, parents have to step up where the schools have failed. But schools have a major role to play here. They should be using every resource they have available to get kids back up to speed. That means additional tutoring, that means targeted support, that means any resources teachers say they need. There are billions of COVID relief dollars still sitting there unspent that really ought to be used to help students. And I think that policymakers need to set really high quality standards for all of the core subjects, and they need to measure students to make sure they're hitting the mark.
Angela, we have maybe 20 seconds left or so, but quickly, curious, what are you following? What else is on your radar?
If we've got 20 seconds, I'll keep it very quick. I'm also following Title IX. I'm so sorry, my audio cut for a second, but I know we've got a short time. I'm also following Title IX and Biden's plan to decimate women's sports. We have a very short time now for people to issue public comments to save women's sports, and I hope that everyone will.
And we'll leave it right there. Angela, great to be with you as always. Thanks so much for your insights.
Thank you, Tracy.
And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including protecting our children. Pope Francis delivers a message of hope to an important group of advisors. Add a step in the right direction. What the World Health Organization is saying about the COVID-19 pandemic. Organization has declared that COVID-19 is no longer a global emergency. The WHO noted that cases for COVID-19 had been trending down for more than a year. COVID is believed to have caused around 7 million deaths worldwide since the global health emergency began in 2020. Meantime, in the U.S., the head for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention announced today that she is stepping down. Dr. Rochelle Walensky says the slowing down of the coronavirus is a good time to make a transition. Her last day as director of the CDC is June 30th. Pope Francis issued a message of encouragement today to members of the Vatican's Child Protection Advisory Board.
Molti di voi hanno impegnato la propria vita in questa causa.
The meeting came after the resignation of founding member Father Hans Zoller in March. The Holy Father emphasized the importance of giving hope to abuse survivors and building a culture of safeguarding to protect further misconduct. Pope Francis is sending a representative to the coronation tomorrow of King Charles III in England. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Holy See Secretary of State, will join world leaders and other dignitaries. Also, for the first time since the Reformation in the 1500s, a Catholic prelate will formally participate in the coronation. Cardinal Vincent Nichols of Westminster is set to give a blessing shortly after King Charles is crowned. We go now to Edward Pentin, Rome correspondent for the National Catholic Register, who is in England right now for the coronation. Ed, great to have you back. Good to see you. So talk to us about this. How significant is it that Cardinal Nichols will give the formal blessing, and what might it signal for the future of Catholic-Anglican relations?
Yes, well, this is very historic, Tracy. I mean, this is the first time that a Catholic bishop has taken part in the coronation since the 16th century, since Bishop Stephen Gardiner crowned Queen Mary. So it is a very significant development. And it's really also because Catholics, until Vatican II, weren't actually allowed into a church that wasn't a Catholic church. So that's also partly why in the coronation of the Queen Elizabeth in 1953, there were no Catholic bishops or Catholics present, although there were some Catholics, of course, because the person who organizes the coronation has traditionally always been a Catholic, the Duke of Norfolk. So that's very significant. I think it points to how the relations between Catholics and Anglicans have changed in some ways for the better, in some ways not, but they have become closer in some ways since the Second Vatican Council, and I think this possibly reflects that.
And what can you tell us about Cardinal Nichols specifically? We understand he's heavily involved in promoting Christian unity.
Yes, he is, and I think he's looking at comments that he said about taking part in this. He's very happy to do so. I think, and he's actually going to give a blessing at the coronation, one of several who does give a blessing. And it comes at a significant moment in the coronation, just after the crown is placed on the king's head. So I think he feels very privileged to be doing that. And yes, as I say, it is very historic in the sense that it hasn't been done for 500 years.
Yeah, very historic indeed. And as you mentioned, Pope Francis is sending the Vatican Secretary of State there. He also donated a relic of the True Cross for the coronation. What more can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, Cardinal Parolin, as being the first papal representative to participate in a coronation for 500 years, that's another historic first for the modern times. But yes, also these relics, these two fragments of the True Cross, are actually going to be integrated into the processional cross. So they're not alone; they are a gift to the King from Pope Francis. It's some are concerned that they say, it's okay to give such relics to the Orthodox. They believe they have the seven sacraments. The Anglican Church doesn't have the seven sacraments. The rites and ordinations are invalid. So there is some controversy about that. But I think generally it's seen as a very positive ecumenical gesture.
Yeah, and millions of people in the UK and, of course, around the world will be watching tomorrow. Tell us about the atmosphere there right now, Ed.
Yes, well, it's very much a festive atmosphere. It's lots of bunting and British flags flying everywhere. There'll be, I think tomorrow, it's going to be a long weekend. There's going to be a public holiday on Monday. So it's a long weekend of festivities, and we'll have plenty of street parties, which is what's usually done at this time, where lots of, it's a great community time, great time for communities to get together and celebrate the coronation of the new monarch. And this is a tradition that goes back very far.
And then also curious about, in what ways has this ceremony been influenced by the Catholic faith? What can you tell us about that?
Yes, this is very interesting because the coronation is probably the most Catholic state liturgy or state ceremony that we have. In fact, 973 was the first coronation of King Edgar, and that was the first consecration of a king in the country, and it is a very Catholic liturgy. It's the king will be anointed. It won't be seen when he's anointed. He'll be anointed with holy oils, and these go over the upper part of the body, and these oils are actually consecrated in Jerusalem. And so I think it shows very much the temporal and spiritual nature of the monarchy. And often that's forgotten, the spiritual aspect of the monarchy. But you'll see it very much in the coronation rites. For example, he receives an orb, which is set under the cross. And it says in the liturgy that, remember always the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ. It's very much Christocentric in that way. And as I say, that goes right back to the Catholic roots of the coronation.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about all this. Very exciting. Thank you again. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, the faith of our fathers. We get a sneak peek at EWTN Ireland's latest film. Plus, the treasure of the church. Pope Francis shares his prayer intention for the month of May. Malta, a centuries-old Catholic group, has elected its new leader. John Dunlap is the order's 81st Grand Master. The Canadian lawyer has been legal advisor to the Holy See's representatives at the United Nations. He also worked in the 1980s with aid patients in Harlem, New York. The Order of Malta is both a lay religious order and a sovereign state subject to international law dating back to the 12th century. A new film from EWTN Ireland was recently shown at the Vatican. Faith of Our Fathers tells the story of a Catholic priest in hiding during the 16th and 17th centuries. Faith of Our Fathers depicts the priest's time in hiding and the surrounding community's efforts to protect him as he ministers to children and celebrates outdoor masses. This amid a crackdown on the Catholic faith throughout Ireland. Joining us now from Rome is Aidan Gallagher, director of EWTN Ireland. Great to be with you today, Aidan. Can you tell us more about this film?
Yes, Tracy. It's a pleasure to be back speaking with you again. Yeah, the film Faith of Our Fathers, it's set in the penal times in Ireland, roughly between the 16 to 1800s, and follows the struggles of a Catholic priest to minister to the Catholic faithful there. And it follows the story how he was teaching the Catholic faith in the hedgerows because Catholic education was banned. Catholic doctrine was banned because it was forbidden, in fact, outlawed to pray, to celebrate the Mass. The Irish language was also outlawed. And in addition to that, Catholics were barred from public office. So we decided to create this particular piece because it has so many contemporary correlations and relationships to the modern day. And this screening that we did in Rome, it was just amazing to see the feedback. And it was almost like a proof of concept, if you like, because so many people stepped forward to say, yeah, this movie may be set in the penal times many hundred years ago in Ireland, but we are still experiencing this in our country today.
Yeah, and I also, another thing I want to talk about, Aidan, is I understand that you presented this film at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome. And so let's talk about that. You know, what was the feedback from the international audience there?
So what they were able to draw from it by the feedback that we received, and I'm talking feedback received from Pakistan, from India, from United Arab Emirates, from countries that came forward, they said that they are experiencing very similar things like that in the country where they were speaking from. But they were inspired because it showed that even though evil tries to root out the manifestation of Christ, in His church through the Holy Sacrament of the Mass and the Catholic Church, that as our Lord said, Peter, you are the rock, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the underworld cannot hold out against it. And that's what happened in Ireland, and that's why I suppose there were so many people came to us, particularly from those countries, and voiced, those very positive sentiments.
That is wonderful. Aidan, we're almost out of time, but quickly, I'm curious, how was your meeting with Pope Francis? I understand you asked for his blessing on this film.
Yes, it was a very blessed occasion for me personally, and indeed for the whole mission of EWTN Ireland. It was wonderful because as we step out and again put our heads above the parapet to try and preach the realism and the practical nature of the gospel, not only in our own country but throughout the world through EWTN, that to seek our Holy Father's blessing on that was just, again, astonishing for us, because the Holy Spirit is what we need to propagate this message of truth, propagate this message of commitment to the Catholic faith, particularly in these modern times. So that was a very, very strong thing for us, and thanks be to God for it.
Absolutely. Aidan, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, and God bless you on this film. Can't wait to see it. Thank you again. Well, finally tonight, Pope Francis released his prayer intention for the month of May. He is asking the faithful to pray for the Church's many volunteer groups and associations.
Son un don, son una riqueza en la Iglesia.
In his monthly video, the Holy Father says the groups known as ecclesial movements are, quote, a gift and a treasure. Many of them began in the years after Vatican II. And Pope Francis says they do important work in dialogue and evangelization. And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.